stepping out of nowhere. I show up and stand and thunder, and now chances
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Really very, very much appreciated. Before we kick off today's episode of the show, a date for your diary if you like. February the 13th, Sunday February the 13th, will be the official 10th anniversary episode of the show. My God, I've been doing this for 10 years. Well, it was actually the 11th of February 2012 when I uploaded the first ever episode to the channel, along with the introductory sort of clip, I suppose, for want of a better word, which has been viewed, several thousand times now, and well out of date. I think I probably need to make a new one because I look far too young in that. Anyway, so that's the plan. So that weekend, that Sunday, will be the 10th anniversary episode, I think it's going to be quite interesting. I mean, all the episodes, as far as I'm aware, are quite interesting. But I think it's going to be a good one. I'm obviously not going to give away any clues as to what it will be, so you will just have to watch it and find out. Anyway. So, on to today's episode of the show. As you can see from the title page, we're looking at Mackmyra again. Why? Well, firstly, I like Mackmyra. I like the whisky they produce. And secondly, the lovely people at Mackmyra UK kindly continue to send me samples. And so it'd be rude not to review their juice, shall we say. I think it's probably close to say that I've done probably more episodes on Mackmyra, I think 6, than any other distillery. I'd have to check that one back to sort of be 100% certain, but I can't think of too many other distilleries that maybe Springbank, obviously, possibly Bruichladdich. So I can't think of too many others that I've done that number of episodes of the show. I mean, when you think about it, I've done 400 and something odd episodes of the show. 6 isn't a huge amount, but obviously, I like doing episodes of the show on Mackmyra. And the reason for today's episode of the show is to look at this. No, not an empty bottle. The Intelligence AI O2 release. Now, I missed out on O1. And so, is it a bit of a gimmick? They created a computer program. I don't know whether the distillery did or whether, I assume the distillery got somebody to create a computer program for them, which basically collated together all the recipes they use, the cask types, I'm assuming the sales data, customer feedback, all this kind of stuff. And the whole object was to basically get the computer to learn about Mackmyra and pick what is the ideal combination of casks and all that kind of stuff. And they did so. They did release number 1, I believe. Angela tinkered with it right at the very end. Can't let the computers get away with everything, I suppose. And what they came up with was, like I said, it was this. It is primarily American oak, which and a little bit of Swedish oak and a little bit of sherry. I mean, I'll give you the full rundown of the cask types when I sort of introduce the lineup. But when you think about the vast array of cask types and interesting stuff that Mackmyra are doing, a computer program comes up with something really safe. I mean, we're not not out there at all, considering all these weird things like sort of green tea casks and, well, not green tea casks but seasoned casks, and cloudberry wine and all this kind of stuff, and it comes up with this. It's a little bit disappointing, really, it has to be said, but of course obviously it's all about the juice at the end of the day. Is it a good bottle? I mean, it's retailing for 60 odd quid, so one should hope it's going to be a good bottling, but it's a bit you know, I looked at the cask makeup and I thought, you know, I was quite surprised. Maybe this is it, that sort of when you have too much information, too bigger parameters, it all gets distilled down into homogeny, if you like, into a sort of simplicity, I suppose. And obviously the thing is, with, as we well know with computers, they have a tendency to obviously think along straight lines to a certain extent. I mean, that's their programming. You know, you don't tend to have computers that sort of go off on tangents. Well, at least I don't think you do. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a computer programmer. I just taste whiskey for a living, so don't shoot me if that's completely false. But as far as I can see, obviously, you know, a computer will only do what you kind of tell it to do to a certain extent. I mean, some people may argue that you know, there is such a thing as artificial intelligence and computers and robots and all this kind of stuff learn. And well, maybe this is the point. Maybe this is, you know, the beginnings of the end of the Scotch whisky or the whisky industry. It'll all be taken over by computers and sort of robots in the end. Well, who knows? Anyway, I think it's enough far-fetched sort of sci-fi-esque waffle. I think it's time to take a look at today's lineup. Right, okay, so yeah, we're going to kick off with the Intelligence AI 02, bottle of 46.4%. The cask makeup is 200 litre or American Standard Barrel First Fill Bourbon, 100 litre First Fill Bourbon, 128 litre freshly saturated ex Oloroso, 128 litre Virgin American Oak, and 30 litre Virgin Swedish Oak, which was filled with pre-stored smoky recipe. So just a quick note on the cask types. I mean, obviously, as you well know, sort of Mackmyra are well known for using a lot of different cask types. So predominantly, like I said, American Standard barrels, 200 litres. They use obviously a lot of odd-sized casks, but generally speaking, the next cask down is a quarter cask, and depending whether it's a quarter of a sherry butt, then it'll be about 125 litres. If it's a quarter of an American Standard barrel, it will obviously be 50 litres. And then you have octaves, which are 50 litre casks. Okay, it's all getting rather confusing. And then you've got blood tubs, which are around about 30 litres, or can be as big as 50 litres when they're technically octaves, or are they blood tubs, or are they... Anyway, all gets horribly complicated, but nevertheless, part of the wonderful thing obviously about Mackmyra is the use of the smaller casks and the larger casks and all this kind of stuff. And the second bottling we'll be looking at is called, all the rest of them are all from the Seasons range. So this is the Bjorksav. And doesn't that give me the opportunity to murder some Swedish words as well, doesn't it? So yeah, you better cover your ears if you're of a nervous disposition. So the Bjorksav, or otherwise known as Bjorksav, bottled at 46.1%. This was released sometime in last year. Combination of, again, 200 litre ex Bourbon, 128 and 200 litre Oloroso seasoned American oak casks, and 100 litre and 200 litre birch sap wine seasoned Swedish and American oak. So could be interesting. Bottling number 3 is a pretty old one actually, from 2017. Don't know the cask makeup because they didn't give it to us back then, you know, back in the midst of time. The recipe was all hush hush and secret. So all I can tell you is that it's probably based again around American oak, and finished or possibly casks that have been seasoned with ex-plantation Jamaican rum, and like I said, bottled at 46.1%. Next bottle we'll be looking at is called Gront. Don't know if that's the correct pronunciation or not, but it seems adequate. So yes, this is the green tea jobby. So 128 litre newly saturated ex Oloroso, saturated with Oloroso sherry and vintage Japanese green tea leaves. 128 litre new and first fill Oloroso, 100 and 200 litre first fill Bourbon, 100 litre first fill Swedish Oak, and was released in 2020. Again bottled at 46.1, as is this one. So on to the next bottling. This is the Vintersol, 500 and 700 litre first fill port pipes. Now port pipes are normally around about 500, so 700 is a bit of an odd size, but anyway, we'll go with that. 120 and 128 litre new and first fill American Oak, 100 litre first fill ex Bourbon, 100 litre and 128 litre first fill Oloroso and Swedish Oak, and was released in 2019. And finally, a little bit of peat. The Stjarnrok, hopefully I got the pronunciation somewhere about right. So 200 litre ex-bourbon filled with the smoky recipe. 30 litre smoky fresh Oloroso. 30 litre smoke and extra smoke. I mean, great. Who says that? You know, oh, I'll have some smoke and a bit of extra smoke on the side, please. So smoke and extra smoke American Oak and ex Bourbon. 100 litre smoke tails in ex Bourbon. 128 litre Oloroso new and first fill. 128 litre American Oak filled with pre-stored elegant recipe. 100 litre Swedish Oak saturated with cloudberry wine, and finally 200 litre ex-bourbon filled with the elegant recipe. So one hell of a recipe there. Could be absolutely stunning, or could be a complete and utter mess. Wonder which one it will be, but anyway, we'll have to wait until we get to the end. So time to kick off with whatever the computer has come up with, I suppose. Right, okay, so let's see what the artificial intelligence has given us. Quite fresh, crisp, crunchy barley, little bit of estuary fruit. There's a quite a hardness there. There's some grippy Swedish oak, bit of vanilla, lot of bourbon, lot of vanilla. It's not sweet and creamy bourbon though. It's kind of slightly edgy bourbon. A little bit of banana, touch of tannin. Actually, more than just a touch of tannin, it has to be said. It's okay. It kind of doesn't quite have the voluptuousness of say the Svensk Ek. And yes, you can smell the distillery character there. Don't really get an awful lot of the sherry, it has to be said. I'm getting a lot more kind of tannin, a lot more oak. Let's see what the palate like. Drying, tannic, tight, kicks off with some nice peat. Again, not a great deal of estuary fruit, has to be said. A bit of barley, a bit of darker fruit kind of coming through on the mid palate, a little bit of chocolate. Again, really tannic, quite hard, almost austere kind of finish. It's that hard on the finish. The oak is really kind of gripping it, and I'm not really getting much in the way of a lovely juicy finish. When I tasted this, I thought, yeah, don't let computers make bloody whiskey, for God's sake. I mean, this is it. This is the sum total of its, you know, supposed intelligence. This is what it's come up with, and well, frankly, I'm not really that impressed at the end of the day. Now, you probably say, well, you're being a bit hard, but the point is, for the last, God knows how many years, Mackmyra have set the bar right up here. They've released some absolutely fantastic stuff, and when something comes out that to me personally, doesn't kind of get to the bar, shall we say, then, well, you know, it really does kind of stick out. I mean, it's okay, nothing wrong with it. It's just not particularly exciting, you know. And I mean, this was something I was dealing with. I'd kind of can it, to be bluntly honest with you. I mean, it's kind of all right, bit of fun, bit of a laugh, but really, you know, let's get back to sort of doing the real job, I suppose. So, yeah, I'm going to move on. Okay, so let's move on to the Bjorksav. So let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Now that's really intriguing. It's kind of quite oily, waxy, really waxy. There's definite sappiness going on there. Sort of, you know, you can smell it. I mean, it really is incredibly sappy. It's got green, not ferny notes, but leafy notes. Barley, a little bit of toffee underneath, a little bit of wood spice. Yeah, that's a lovely nose. That's really intriguing. That's interesting. I mean, that gets you straight up. It's kind of like, you know, whoa. I mean, some people probably might not actually like it. That's very true. I mean, it's got a very, very distinctive nose, but it's really unusual, it has to be said. Yeah, little bit of sherry kind of coming through now, but again, that's very understated, which is good. Let's see what that's like. Kind of opens up a little bit more sort of what you would expect, you know, barley, vanilla, creamy American oak, touch of coffee. Then the sappy notes kind of come in. The sort of the intense herbalness kind of comes on the middle. It's sort of, you know, an interesting kind of bitter, slightly sweet herbal kind of battle going on. Touch of dried cherry fruit, wood spice, more herbal notes. I mean, it is really herbal, really leafy. I love that waxiness that it has. It's got a really intriguing mouthfeel. And sort of, yeah, I like the progression as well, you know, so it does kind of open up a little bit more sort of, as you would expect it to a certain extent, before all the weirdness kind of happens, and then all the barley and all the fruit and all that kind of goes out the window, and you're just in this kind of strange herbal zone. Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I mean, I really do. I think it is just so different, so interesting, so unique. And this is what Mackmyra do so well. This is what Angela does amazingly well. So like I said, you know, just switch the computer off and just keep making stuff like that. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Vinterdrom. So, explantation Jamaican rum casks. Let's see what that is, because it's on this end, shall we? Oh, that's gorgeous. That is beautiful. Lightly oiled, sweet rummy fruits, dried banana skin, estery sort of Mackmyra fruit. Pretty uncomplicated nose, it has to be said, but it's delivering absolutely wonderfully. A little bit of barley, anise, a touch of rye possibly. Plenty of rummy notes, like I said. There's a almost kind of agricole kind of edge there as well. I mean, like I said, I don't get the impression that there's a huge array of casks or different cask types gone into this. It does feel relatively straightforward, but that straightforward recipe is pretty damn good, it has to be said. I mean, sometimes there is something to be said for simplicity. Let's see what that's like. that's got a really spicy finish. So it's oily, it's rummy, it's slightly agricole kind of to start off with. There's some rye-like spices, herbs, touch of dried fruit, but the rum is pretty noticeable, and it's not particularly sweet rum. It's got a sort of a bit of an edge to it. I mean, it's the ABV is certainly helping that kind of slight edgy feeling. Spirit character starting to move through on the finish. A little bit of sort of possibly apple, apricot, but the sort of oily rum notes kind of just hang in there and hang in there. And it's a stunning rum. It's a stunning whiskey, it has to be said. Yes, all right, it's a bit heavy on the rum, it has to be said, but enjoyable nevertheless. Right, let's move on to the Gronty then, or Gronte, or however you wish to pronounce it. It's probably not Tay, is it? It's probably or sort of I don't know. Anyway, just insult all you Swedes, I suppose, so that you can't talk. Yeah, let's see what the nose gives us. So nice nose. Certainly getting plenty of the Oloroso. Plenty of the dried fruits, soft dried fruits, but I'm getting quite a lot of estery pineapple, apricot, barley. The green tea notes are really quite subtle. It's certainly not as in your face as, say, the Bjorksav. There's a little bit of apple, a bit of freshness, almost saline minerality as well. It's a little bit more sort of straightforward, you know, you kind of look at it and think, ooh, green tea, ooh, this is going to be a bit weird, and the reality is it isn't actually. It's, when I say it's less weird than the Bjorksav, it's just kind of, it's almost kind of, the green tea is kind of almost kind of bringing out more of a herbal character and mingling with the sherry, and it's just got a very, what feels like to be a herbally sherry kind of character. Again, the balance is really nice though. It's not overly sherried. But yeah, I like that. Let's do the past one. Stunningly smooth. Again, kicks off with the American oak. Very soft, slightly creamy. Also starts off with the estery sort of Mackmyra distillery character, a little bit of dried fruit kind of coming through on the mid-palate, malt, tannin, a little bit more of the sherry. The sherry kind of like comes in on the mid-palate, lingers through towards the finish. A little bit of honey, a little bit of spice. I like that. I think that's very, very impressive. And like I said, it's not too weird. You know, you think sort of green tea, ooh, hello, this is going to be a bit left field. And well, it is slightly left field, I suppose. But it, like I said, it works really nicely. It just kind of feels like a slightly more herbally kind of sherried, well, not finished whiskey, but it's got that kind of sort of herbally sherry kind of character. But again, like I said, the balance is really good, and I think that's really impressive. So, Right, okay, so moving on to the Vintersol. So I think it's what I was right in saying this was one of the autumn releases in the season's releases. It would be, wouldn't it, with sort of port and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, let's see what the nose gives us. Again, opens up with the classic Mackmyra character, the sort of estery, banana-y, apricot, pineapple, apple. The port is again subtle, understated, touch of red fruits, herbs, a little bit of minerality, touch of spices and edginess there, but it's again well contained. Some red currant. touch of citrus as well. I mean, lovely nose, it has to be said. Again, the port sort of maybe sort of starts to come through a little stronger once it's been left in the glass for a little while, but if you just sort of give it a little bit more aeration, it certainly settles back down again, and the emphasis is pretty much on the spirit character with the sort of the embellishment of the port, which is exactly where it should be, really, isn't it? Let's see what the power's on. A bit more porty on the palate, or certainly on the beginning of the palate. A little bit more treacle, sort of red-black fruits, touch of almost syrup as well. But the alcohol, the sort of the minerality kind of balances that up quite nicely. There's a touch of pepper, some cinnamon stick. Distillery character is a little bit under the radar. It does kind of start to come through on the mid palate, tail end of the mid palate, and sort of onto the finish. Bit herbally, like I say, quite spicy, with a dry, dusty, herbally kind of spice on the finish. I think this is always the thing. When you start playing around with port casks, they are big buggers to start off with, and they are quite tannic and they're quite dry, and they add, you know, some lovely notes, some dried fruits, often some chocolate, that kind of thing, but they can add on a sort of a little bit of bitterness and a little bit of well, more than a little bit of tannin. So, you know, you kind of have to sort of work with them and be a bit judicious with them. And again, I think Angela has been sort of, you know, spot on there. I think it's a really lovely whiskey, and yeah, good stuff.
Fear, don't regret, but at the rising hill.
Right, and finally we're on to a bit of smoky with a bit of smoky on the side, as they say. Let's see what the Stjarnrok gives us then, shall we? Obvious peat. I mean, it's astringent, it's a herbal, it's medicinal, but there's some slightly smoky, meaty notes beneath, some sweet barley, there's a little wininess, tobacco leaf, herbs, tar, dried fruit, more tar, berries. I mean, ooh, it's a stunning nose, it really is. There was just so much going on in here. It's kind of like almost kind of blowing my circuits, as they say. Certainly this would screw your computer program up, or your computer up. I mean, it really is impressive. Got that lovely astringency and smokiness and tarriness, but it's got balance, it's got elegance. Alright, maybe that you can argue underneath all that there ain't a great deal of distillery character, there's no real estuary fruit or anything like that. I get that, okay, I can live with that, because the complexity is coming from sort of other angles, shall we say. But that is a lovely, lovely whiskey. Of course, when I say it's a lovely whiskey, you've got to obviously like peated whiskies, otherwise, well, you ain't going to love it, but I do. Let's see what the pass up. Big, chunky, winey, oloroso-y, tarry, peaty, a lot of peat, smoke, little bit of estuary fruit on the middle, maybe my kind of really looking for it, quite bitter on the finish, quite tannic, the juicy kind of treacle kind and tar kind of is attempting to offset that. It's a wild old ride. It's kind of, I suppose, it's a hell of a finish. It's tart, it's slightly tarry, it's bitter, the peat continues, it's a bit of a kind of, whoa. I mean, it's not sort of a peat monster. It's got a lovely aftertaste though. It really fades nicely into this kind of cigar tobacco kind of tobacco smoke leaf kind of aftertaste. I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it has personality. It has character. Doesn't have a great deal of distillery character, like I said, but what it lacks in that department, it certainly makes up for in other departments. So I think that's a bloody good one to finish with. Right, okay, so that's on today's episode of the show. So, firstly, obviously, any comments that I do make or have made on today's episode of the show are wholly my own and have no bearing or relevance to the company that employs me. So I can now say what I feel like. Well, I've already said what I felt about the AI02. I don't think it was really that good. It was a bit of a gimmick. It's a bit fun. Really, I think it's probably about time that one got laid to rest. And I don't think a third bottling is really that necessary, because although it's, like I said, it's not going to be a bad whiskey. I mean, Mackmyra does not make bad spirit, but it's a really sort of, it's really dull. It is dull. It is such a dull bottling. It is untrue, and I'm sorry to say that, but that's how I feel about that. So, enough said. On to the Bjorksav. That's real left field stuff, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of really good fun, sappy, weird. It's kind of Scandinavian written all over it, has to be said. I mean, I love the stuff. I think it's really good, and you should at least try it, because it's probably like nothing you've ever had before, which means you'll either end up loving it or hating it. A Vinterdrom, yeah, I mean, alright, it was a bit, I wouldn't say kind of one-dimensional, because that's kind of being disingenuous to it, but it was a bit straightforward. It was a bit like kind of American oak, sort of, and either finished in these casks, or probably more than likely it was a vatting of seasoned casks. And, well, it was nice, it was pleasant, absolutely nothing at all wrong with it. The moment Caribbean, I think, kind of took it up a level, should we say, but certainly I don't think that bottling was that bad. The Gronty, yep, again, another classic bottling from Mackmyra, really balanced. On paper you think, oh, that's a bit weird, but when you taste it, it's actually anything less or nothing like it, or whatever. It was just a bloody good whiskey at the end of the day. Really enjoyable. Vinterdrom, or Vintersol, I should say. Sorry. Again, just really well balanced. Like I said, playing around with port pipes is never going to be the most straightforward thing on the face of the planet. And again, I think Angela did a really good job of melding it into the body of the whiskey, and yeah, I thought that was lovely. And to be honest with you, I think probably the bottling that stole the show was the Stjarnrok, and not because it was peated. It just had so much personality, it just so much going on. I mean, now maybe there's a toss-up between that and the Bjorksav, I suppose, for most intriguing bottling of the day. And it's been really good fun actually tasting these all together, because again, this is not something I tend to do very often. I often tend to taste these bottles in isolation. So and although obviously you remember certain bottlings from the past, it's always good to kind of taste them in their kind of natural setting, I suppose, for want of a better word. But anyway, so yeah, Stjarnrok, available at the moment, I believe fairly widely available, so I would certainly suggest you get hold of a bottle of that, like I said, and the Bjorksav. Just give it a try. Anyway, so that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly think it's been a whole load of fun, and hopefully I won't get a knock on the door saying, "What you're talking about? My AI bottling is crap." Well, no, it's not crap, right? But anyway, enough said, as they say. Until next week, good afternoon and good dramming.